Mary was just 17. She had no mother, no kin to shield her, and no one to stand between her and the cruelty of the man who dared call himself her stepfather. The ranch that once felt like home had turned into a prison of dust and pain. The ropes dug deep into her skin. Her wrists burned as the rough fibers tore at her flesh. Her legs were stretched against the splintered fence, leaving her helpless beneath the blazing sun. Each breath hurt. Every heartbeat carried the weight of fear. She was too young to understand how her life had twisted into this nightmare, too young to fight a man hardened by years of power and bitterness. He struck her when she refused to sign away the ranch deeds. He cursed her tears, told her she was worthless, that she was a burden, that without him she was nothing. His words cut deeper than the rope. His hands left bruises that marked more than skin. They marked her soul. Mary felt her childhood slipping away, replaced by silence and terror. She learned to hide her tears, bite her lips until they bled, and bury her screams. But today she couldn't hide anymore. Her voice split the air with desperate cries. She screamed for help, though she no longer believed it would come. Her throat burned, her voice cracked, yet she kept calling, clinging to the faint hope that someone might hear. The sun showed no mercy. Sweat and blood mingled on her skin. The dry grass whispered of death. Her stepfather's shadow haunted her mind, a reminder that the torment wouldn't end unless she gave him everything her mother left behind. She closed her eyes, remembering her mother's smile, the warmth the ranch once held, the laughter that used to fill the air. Now there was only dust, rope, bruises, and the cruel laughter of a man who found power in her pain. Mary's body trembled, her spirit fraying. The ranch was slipping from her hands, her future stolen before it began. She was a child trapped in a world of greed and violence. Her cries echoed across the fields, startling the birds from their posts. The wind carried her voice far, but would it reach anyone who cared? Anyone brave enough to face the cruelty that bound her? Her lips quivered as her strength faded. She whispered to the empty sky, a final plea for salvation, not knowing if anyone would hear. Her heart raced, not with hope, but with the fear of being forgotten. And then came the sound that shattered the silence, the pounding of hooves. John Carter rode through the dry fields, just another day beneath the wide blue sky, when something reached his ear. At first faint, almost like the wind's trick, but then again a cry. Not an animal's cry, but a human one, raw, desperate. John pulled his horse to a halt, brow furrowing as he turned toward the sound. There was weight in that voice, a kind of suffering no decent man could ignore. He urged his horse forward, slow, cautious. The grass crunched beneath hooves, the heat thick with dust. And then he saw her. Mary, bound cruelly to the fence, dirt and tears streaking her face, her body marked by pain, her spirit scarred by betrayal. For a moment, John's heart clenched so hard he thought it might stop. He had seen pain before, but never like this. He had fought men, buried friends, and watched fate's cruel hand tear families apart. But this was different. This wasn't an outlaw's ambush or some act of nature. This was evil, chosen and deliberate. Mary lifted her head at the sound of hooves, her eyes wide, glimmering with both fear and the fragile flicker of hope. Her lips trembled. She begged him without words through that broken, pleading stare. John slid from his horse, boots crunching against the dry dirt, and stepped closer. The red scarf around his neck fluttered in the wind as he knelt before her. His voice was rough but calm. "You're safe now, girl. I've got you." Her shoulders trembled, half from relief, half from the terror that still gripped her heart. John drew his knife, the blade flashing in the sunlight, and began slicing through the ropes. Each strand snapped with a sharp crack like chains breaking free. Mary flinched as blood rushed back into her wrists, but she didn't cry out. She wouldn't show weakness, not in front of this stranger who had already done more for her than anyone in years. When the last rope fell, John steadied her with a strong hand. She leaned against him, her body quivering from exhaustion, and in that moment he made a silent vow. No man with honor could turn away now. But before the dust could settle, the air itself seemed to tense. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a shadow still lingered, the kind that never lets go. Was this rescue truly the end of her torment, or the start of a darker fight yet to come? The ropes were gone, but fear still clung to Mary like a second skin. Her hand shook as she tried to stand. John's arm stayed firm around her, guiding her toward the horse. "Easy now," he said, his voice steady, soothing, like one would calm a frightened animal. "Breathe. You're safe. He won't touch you again, not while I'm here." Mary wanted to believe him. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but only a whisper escaped. It was him, my stepfather. He wants the ranch. He won't stop. John's jaw clenched. He'd seen greed twist men before, but preying on one's own blood, that was lower than sin. Looking into Mary's tearful eyes, his blood began to burn. Listen to me, he said firmly. You're not alone anymore. Whatever he thinks he owns, he's wrong. That ranch is yours. He's got no right to take it. Mary's tears fell freely, not from fear, but from hearing words she'd longed for her whole life. Someone was finally standing on her side. John lifted her gently onto the horse. She gripped the saddle horn, weak but trying to hold steady. With one smooth motion, John swung up behind her, steady and sure. The horse started forward, away from the fence, away from Hank's shadow. The ride was silent, save for the creak of leather and the rhythm of hooves. Mary leaned back slightly, trusting the stranger with her life, because deep down she knew he was her only chance. They reached the ranch house just as the sun began to fall. The porch boards groaned beneath their boots as John carried her inside. The air smelled of dust and wood, but here at least she was free. John set her gently on a chair, fetched water, and began cleaning the wounds on her arms. His hands were rough, but his touch was careful, almost fatherly. Mary watched him, confused at first, wondering why this stranger cared more for her than the man who was supposed to. Night settled around them, quiet but heavy. Mary sat wrapped in a blanket by the fire while John leaned against the wall, eyes sharp as though he knew this peace was only borrowed time, because somewhere out there in the dark Hank was still breathing, and men like him never quit easy. The question that hung in the air was simple, yet terrifying. Would Hank return stronger, or would the law of the West finally catch up to him? He had fought men, buried friends, and watched the cruel hand of fate tear families apart. But this was different. This wasn't an ambush or some act of nature. This was evil, done by choice. Mary lifted her head at the sound of hooves, her eyes glistening with fear and a fragile spark of hope. Her lips trembled as she begged him silently, only through that shattered gaze. John dismounted, boots crunching against the dust, and walked toward her. The red scarf around his neck rippled in the wind as he knelt to meet her eyes. His voice came low and rough, yet steady. You're safe now, girl. I've got you. Her shoulders shook, half in relief, half in terror of what might follow. John drew his knife, sunlight flashing across the blade, and cut through the ropes. Each fiber snapped with a harsh crack like the breaking of chains. Mary winced as blood returned to her hands, but she swallowed the pain. She refused to seem weak, not before the man who had already done more for her than anyone else in years. When the last rope dropped, John steadied her with a firm hand. She leaned against him, trembling, and in that instant he made a silent promise. No man of honor could walk away now. But before peace could settle, the night itself seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere beyond the ranch, a shadow still lingered, the kind that never lets go. Was this truly the end of her torment, or the beginning of something darker? The ropes were gone, but fear still clung to Mary like a second skin. Her hands shook as she tried to stand. John's arm stayed strong around her, guiding her toward his horse. Easy now, he murmured, calm as if soothing a frightened colt. Breathe. You're safe. He won't touch you again, not while I'm here. Mary wanted to believe him. Her lips parted, but only a whisper escaped. It was him, my stepfather. He wants the ranch. He won't stop. John's jaw tightened. He had seen greed turn men into monsters before, but a man who preyed on his own kin was something worse. He met Mary's eyes and felt his own blood burn. Listen to me, he said firmly. You're not alone anymore. Whatever he thinks he owns, he's wrong. That ranch is yours, and he's got no right to take it. Mary's tears spilled, not from fear, but from hearing what she'd needed all along. Someone was finally on her side. John lifted her onto the horse, and though she was weak, she held herself upright. With one smooth motion, John mounted behind her. The horse carried them forward, away from the fence, away from Hank's cruelty. The ride was quiet except for the creak of leather and the steady beat of hooves. Mary leaned back slightly, trusting this stranger because deep down she knew he was her only chance. They reached the ranch house as the sun began to fall. The porch groaned beneath their boots as John carried her inside. The air was thick with dust and memory, but here she was free. John set her gently on a chair, fetched water, and cleaned the cuts on her arms. His hands were calloused, yet his touch was careful, almost fatherly. Mary watched him, wondering why this stranger cared more than the man who was supposed to protect her. Night settled heavy over the ranch, warm and restless. Mary sat close to the fire, blanket tight around her, fear still clouding her eyes. John stood by the door, arms crossed, listening to every sound outside. He knew men like Hank. They never walked away after being shamed, they always came back, and sure enough, the silence broke. Boots crunched on gravel. The gate creaked. Mary froze, breath caught. John's hand found his pistol. Then came Hank's voice, raw with rage. "You can't hide her from me, old man. That ranch is mine, and so was everything on it." Mary's eyes filled with tears, but this time she didn't cower. She rose, trembling yet defiant. "You're lying," she cried. "Mama left it to me. You'll never take it again." The door burst open. Hank stormed in, eyes bloodshot, fists clenched. Drunk on fury, he lunged at her. But John stepped forward, solid as oak. The two men clashed. Fists met flesh. Boots scraped wood, and the lantern swung wildly, throwing shadows across the walls. Mary pressed herself to the corner, heart pounding as the fight raged. Hank swung hard, but John dodged, landing a punch that sent him stumbling. Still, Hank came again, fueled by hatred. John's years showed in his face, but his strength hadn't faded. Every strike he threw wasn't just for Mary, but for every soul crushed under men like Hank. The struggle shook the room until John forced Hank down, pinning him. The pistol skittered across the floor. "Your time's up," John said coldly. "You're finished here." Mary stepped forward, legs trembling, eyes burning. "You'll answer for what you've done. Not to me, not to him, but to the law." For the first time, fear flickered in Hank's eyes. He knew the truth. In the West, a man could run, but not forever from justice. The dawn rose gold and red. Hank was no longer the shadow haunting Mary's nights. With John beside her, the lawman came and took him away. His cruelty, her scars, the witnesses, all spoke for her. For the first time in years, the weight lifted. The ropes were gone. The fear was broken. In its place bloomed something fragile, hope. Life on the ranch wasn't easy. There were fences to mend and nights when silence ached like old wounds. But Mary was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, and John, the man who'd stood between her and ruin, stayed by her side. He taught her to ride with confidence, to shoot straight, to stand tall against fear. The frightened girl of 17 grew into a woman of strength and grace. She bore her scars not as shame, but proof she'd endured. Seasons passed. The ranch thrived again under her steady hands. And through it all, John stayed close. Their bond deepened, slowly, quietly, turning gratitude into something lasting. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real, born of pain and faith. When Mary finally smiled again, it carried both sorrow and joy. A smile that said she'd been broken, but never destroyed, because in the West, justice takes time, but it always comes. And sometimes, when the dust settles, love grows right there, in the ashes of survival.